She will tell you about her, but she's not.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good. And also, thank you, Diane. She has been such a gracious hostess, and I hope you all take very, very good care of her. Because as someone who has been coordinator of a much smaller group in a smaller town, I know how much work she does. In addition to organizing this meeting, getting the speakers to her home, going to the airport to pick them up, and wining and dining them. So thank you, Diane. As far as any slots that are left, please don't fight. Peace. You may, by the way, Diane, you mentioned the last speaker spoke very fast. I can speak very fast. I was born in New York City. I can speak really, really fast. But I'm not going to do that because I've lived in Texas for 23 years. And I can talk as slow as I need to. This is my return trip to Chicago. I was here 22 years ago when I was student teaching at a Waldorf curative school here called Esperanza, and I was staying in Lincoln Park. And I find Chicago to be just a wonderful place, and I love coming here. Thank you all for having me. It's a gift and a blessing to be with you, and I'm especially honored to be here with a lot of first-timers, virgins, so to speak. And you'll notice probably that my flyer didn't say much to draw you. I like to go with an understated approach. I want people to come because they are moved of themselves to come. I don't have anything to tell you you don't already know. The power for you to know what's right for you is in you. And that's pretty much the crux of my message. When I was coming back from my near-death experience, I didn't actually see this, but I would swear to you that I did, that I saw a big sign out in the cosmos and it said, "Beware, you are now entering a free will zone." So everything that I have to say about the near-death experience has to do with the key word freedom. Of course there's love, and of course there's light. But as human beings, it's about the freedom to choose love and light. I stopped talking about my near-death experience 7 years ago. I no longer publicly speak about it, and I know that that sounds strange since I'm standing in front of you and speaking about it. I do not advertise, I do not market. I only come when someone calls me. If someone asks, then I will share. Freedom. It is not for me to tell you what truth is. I do my best to live my life as an example, and then if that draws somebody to me and they ask me a question, they're in danger because I'll probably talk for hours. And I love talking about the near-death experience. It was, of course, a key experience of my life. But I reached a point where I've been on television in Houston and San Antonio and Austin. I've been in the newspaper. I've been speaking publicly about it every month for years. And I started thinking, I keep talking about the past. Something that happened to me that was wonderful, as if that was the high point of my life. And I realized that I didn't want that for myself. And I thought, how can I become that experience? And I've devoted the last 7 years of my life to learning how to be the love and the light. And I'd like to share with you today partly that journey. And also I like to put the near-death experience in the context of my entire spiritual journey and not have it as an event that stands alone. So with your indulgence, I'm going to run the course of this life with you to some extent. Starting with my first memory, which I actually saw again in my life review. The only part that I brought back from my life review was remembering my life preview. And in my first memory, I was about 3.5 years old, and I used to love to sit by the radiator in the south window of our house in Flushing, New York, with the sun coming in and the warmth of the radiator coming up, and float out of my body, where I would hold hands in a circle with angels. And in my ordinary life memory, I remembered my mother had saying, "Oh, don't say that, honey, people will think you're crazy." In my life preview review, I saw that the words really were, "Honey, you sound crazy." And that brought me great sadness, because I had to choose between the angels and my mother at that point. And my mother was the person who was taking care of me, and survival is a very important aspect of life. Our bodies are very geared to survival. So I chose on the side of not floating out of my body anymore, but I was always psychic. So at age 11, I started reading Edgar Cayce. In the 60s, when I was still an adolescent, my dream job was to become a parapsychologist and write books about parapsychology. And I was fascinated by the work that J.D. Ryan was doing at Duke University, especially with the Worrells, who would pray over flowers and wounds on animals and heal them. When I was in my 20s, my library, I had an entire wall covered with anything that had to do with an esoteric nature. When my marriage was dissolving and I was under great stress, I had I guess a psychological crisis. And one day I was just going what I thought was crazy, because I would have a thought, and that thought would branch into 10 thoughts, and those 10 thoughts would branch into 10 thoughts, and those 10 would branch into 10 thoughts, and it would go on and on like that into infinity, and I couldn't keep up with all my thoughts. And I was racing, and my heart was racing, and I was shaking, and I knew that I was going insane, and I put my head, I was living in Florida at the time, and I put my head in the air conditioner and put the blower on strong, and that didn't work. And I turned the radio up really loud, and that didn't work. And I ran water over my head, and that didn't work. And suddenly, I just started to cry. And just profound weeping. And I realized that I was weeping for all the love that had been but had not gotten the expression that it needed to have, either from my parents, or from my husband, or from myself. And I sat there weeping. Now I need to back up a little bit. I was born to a non-religious Jewish family. We were culturally religious. My grandfather was Orthodox, my uncle was Orthodox, but we weren't. So I didn't have much of a religious concept. I always kind of liked Christmas. What Jewish kid in New York didn't? And so, and then my best friend had died of cancer when I was 14, and I had a long debilitating illness, and I lost 2 more friends by the time I was 16, and I had become an atheist. I was very angry with God. I shook my fist at one point at God and said, "If you exist, damn you, I'm so angry with you, I won't speak to you." So here I was at 21, having this experience and weeping for all the love that was at the source, but had, like through a twisted horn, had come out as a sour note. And at that point, hovering around my shoulders were my grandmother, who I adored, my best friend Robin, one of my other best friends Chris, and a fourth being that identified itself as my guardian angel. If you know anything about Judaism, there's no concept of guardian angels. So even if you were raised religious, that would be not something that you would ordinarily think about. And they told me that they were always with me. And they're with me right now. And they told me that I was going to have a conversation with my father, who had died when I was 17, but that we wouldn't stay together because he had other work to do. And that began a second spiritual journey for me. And I moved to Colorado, and I became an organic fruit farmer. I worked in a chiropractor's office doing reflexology. I was a newspaper reporter for a very small town newspaper called the Delta County Independent. I think the circulation was probably 2,300, but I really felt important being a newspaper reporter. I knew everything there was to know about herbs, and I got an unbelievable opportunity to live in the wilderness, to caretake a 2,300-acre horse ranch in the Gunnison National Forest on Minnesota Creek that was centered in 15,000 acres of the West Elk Wilderness. And I lived there for a year and a half, some of that time with other people, but for at least 6 months by myself. During that time, I would pass a herd of 700 elk and deer every night. My next door neighbors were 2 bald eagles who had 4 babies. So I had 6 bald eagles that come up every night, circle. And every day I got to walk 10 miles to visit the beavers and see how their dam was coming. How are you, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, and how's your dam? During this time, I had a hummingbird come up and kiss me on the cheek. I meditated by a creek, and a wild rabbit came up and sat in my lap. And I was having a wonderful time. I worked 3 hours a week, and that was all that I needed to support myself in this free environment. No running water, no electricity, and absolute peace. I meditated. I read everything spiritual. I taught myself 3 chords on the guitar and thought I was a musical genius. I wrote a lot of poetry and was having the ideal sort of St. Francis experience, a very spiritual life. And I suddenly, there was a point at which I felt like I had reached a threshold and I had to make a decision. I had to make a decision if I was going to even go further into the wilderness and learn to be like the people at Findhorn who spoke to the elementals. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but speak to the spiritual beings of the earth was one of my callings. Or was I to go back into the world and be with people? Because except for the people who I invited out there, humans became referred to as humanoids, and we would have my friends and I would have an occasional humanoid sighting because of the remoteness of this place. And so I decided I was going to walk past the beaver pond. I was going to walk to that trail where I'd never been before, where very few humans ever tread. You can only get there by horse or by foot. And I walked up this hill, probably about 15 miles from where I lived in my little cabin on the creek. And I made obeisance to the 4 directions. I honored the 4 directions, and I closed my eyes and I sat down on the side of the mountain and I put my hands down so that I would receive guidance. What should I do? And my hand falls, remember where I am now, my hand falls on an object that is round and plastic. And so, of course, I open my eyes and I look down, and here's a little black plastic circular thing, and I open it up, and it's a compass. I had asked for directions. And I said, great, I just got Groucho Marx as my spirit guide. It was pointing north. Surprise, surprise. So I knew I had gotten an answer to my prayer, even though I didn't know what the answer was. And so I figured there was no point meditating any further, so I got up to walk back. And as I was walking back, and I'm putting quotation marks around the word heard, I heard 2 voices. And one was someone I had absolutely no relationship to at all. And I was told it was Hillel, who is an ancient Jewish rabbi before the time of Christ. And the words were, if not you, who? And if not now, when? And then my beloved grandmother's, in her tone of speaking, I heard, if you're not good for something, what are you? And I knew the answer. And I knew that those two messages said that I needed to go back and be with people. So I did. I got a little cabin in town, and I went back to work more full-time at the health food store. And I was working at the health food store every day, and then one day I woke up on the floor of my cabin, my house, small house. And I was in a fetal position, and when I woke up, I was in a lot of pain. And I didn't know how I had gotten on the floor. And I passed out, and I woke up again. And pretty much the same thing happened again. I was in a lot of pain, and I was rocking, I remember. And I passed out again, and I woke up again. And the third time that I woke up, I didn't have any pain, and I felt an unbelievable peace, and knew with as much certainty as I'd ever had about anything in my whole life that I was about to die, and that was just fine. But my mom had always told me to wear clean underwear and with no holes in it, in case, something ever happened to you. And I really didn't want my friends to find me dead on the floor. So I decided I needed to get to the couch so that it would seem like I died in my sleep. But my legs didn't work. But because I had lived in the wilderness and, I was eating organic foods and living a healthy life, and I felt my own trees, and I carried my own water. I was in pretty good shape. I was able to propel myself with my elbows across the floor and hoist myself up onto the couch, and with a little bit of trauma, because I am a bit of a trauma queen. I folded my arms like this, said a little prayer, and flew out the top of my head. I didn't stop to look at anything. I was just sailing, full speed ahead, and that was a wonderful experience. Absolute, total darkness, just black as could be, but so comforting. And speed, but no friction. Just the pure exhilaration of traveling fast with no resistance in some place that felt safe and that made no demands of me. And I traveled in that for a long time. And unlike a tunnel that starts out wide and gets narrower, mine started out narrow and then sort of opened up like a horn, I guess like a trombone. Do trombones open up like that, Diane? Oh, sort of. Well, some instrument that opens up like that. And I started to slow, and the tunnel just sort of disappeared as it opened up, and there I was floating in the cosmos with stars all around me. And I said to myself, because there was no one else to talk to, well, I went really fast, really far, for a long time. Those stars should be closer. But they weren't. They were still very far away. So that surprised me. And then I saw out of the corner of my right eye, I saw a portal of light, just a circle. And I knew I wanted to be there. I didn't know how I knew that, but I knew I wanted to be there. And travel was no longer the means to get there. I simply wanted to be there, so I was there. And I entered this light through the portal. I would say that a butterfly landing on a flower would seem 1,000,000 times heavier than the way I landed into this light. It was so gentle and soft, and suddenly I was in this world of light. And the light was perfect temperature, perfect amount of light. There's no words to describe it. That's the problem with going into the near-death experience, is that words become inadequate, and the only way you can convey them is at an energy level. And as I said to someone here earlier, anybody who's had a near-death experience knows that you're always having a conversation underneath these words. There's a conversation beneath the conversation. It's a conversation of pure energy or pure love and light. So I entered into this light that I cannot describe, and I like to use the image of the tractor beam in Star Trek because most people can relate to that. There was this tractor beam to my heart from a source that I can name as God only because that's a name that is available to me, but I don't like to use it because everybody has an image of what that means. So I refer to it often as source, but it was a being. It was a being that was the center of all things, and that being was unlimited love. And I was greeted with such love and acceptance and warmth, unconditionally, as if I was the center of the universe myself. And I was locked into that love for much too short a time. And at some point, I realized that this love, this light, this being was at the center, but that it was equally bright in the periphery, and the periphery went on forever. And I began to wonder, how is that possible that there could be a center and a periphery that are equally as bright? The laws of physics say that's not possible. Now, I didn't care anything about physics, I never grew up, but this was bothering me that it offended the laws of physics. So as I had that thought, I broke the connection with God by questioning. If I get another opportunity, I will not do that. When I get another opportunity, I will not do that. But as I broke that connection, I then felt this powerful current coming at me from the left. Like a river, a forceful river coming at me. But I didn't want to take my attention off of God. But this river came at me, and it came right up through my shoulder, and it was a river of music. The most amazing music. I'm guessing it was the sound of everything in the universe, each making its own perfect note. That's what I'm guessing. I don't know what it was made of, but it was glorious. And it entered my body, and I realized I was the music, and the music was me. Every cell of my body was music. And the music took on a round shape and colors that were hollow and bubbled up like champagne, and every single one of those bubbles was pure ecstasy. And I was that, and that was me. And the force of this river turned me, and it faced me to the right, and it was this moment that I realized that I was made of light. It was like a dress. I didn't have feet. Didn't need feet. I was floating. And it pushed me in this direction, and before me I saw a temple. And in that temple was set in like a park. And there were other beings of light in the park. And the other beings of light and I were literally and figuratively transparent. We knew each other's hearts. We knew each other's minds. We were one with each other. And we were separate. And that's when I learned that life is a paradox. Paradox, that's it. Everything is a paradox. And if you can get that truth through your mind, it's sort of like you only get to be perfect when you give up perfection. I was separate from the people I was totally connected to, and they knew that I had a purpose to be there, and they knew every thought I had and every feeling I had and greeted me, and as I floated towards this temple, they also left me to be on my path, going to where I was supposed to go. And so I drifted by them, and I went up, and there were these steps not unlike these, very low to the ground, very wide, very deep, and columns, and there was this temple building, and I was obsessed with the stone in the left-hand corner. You might call it the foundation stone. I don't know why. And it was about the width of 3 chairs and probably the depth of the first row to the second row and the height of the chairs. And it was made out of light, and there was no substance to it, and I couldn't see through it. And I couldn't understand that. And so I forgot to mention that as I was floating, I had the sense that I knew everything. I can't tell you what that was. If I could, I'd write the book. But I did know that I knew everything. But I could also ask questions. So I asked the question, what is this stone? And why is it made out of light but I can't see through it? And I was told that all of matter is light. The shape is light woven by thought. You could think of that as the blueprint that the architect might draw. And all of the substance is sound. Sound that causes the molecules to fill the form. And that is the nature of all matter. I have a very good friend in Austin. He's featured prominently in a book called The Field. His name is Hal Puthoff. Many of you might know about him because he also featured prominently in Remote Viewing. And I wrote him 2 pages explaining to him this experience I had with this foundation stone, and that to me all of nature, everything, is light and sound. And he wrote back very succinctly, yes, that's exactly right. That's what my work's all about. So at that point, I don't remember, everything had a natural transition, but at that point, suddenly I wasn't there at the temple anymore. I was behind, for lack of a better word, a veil. I wasn't in the light, I wasn't in the dark, I wasn't in earth, I was in a place that was quasi-light, and before me, in the distance, stood a very, very large being of light, a male being of light, indistinct, but male. And he said, you need to go back now. And he was quite an authority figure. And telepathy works very well. And so I said, you're the representative of God? And he said, yes, I am. But I really wasn't too thrilled about this prospect, and I wasn't moving very quickly at that point. So by his side, much smaller, appeared 2 ovoid shapes. You might think of them as opalescent eggs. And they were pulsing with light and energy. And from these opalescent eggs, I don't know if there is a word for heart path, empath, I guess would be it. Instead of a thought coming from them, a feeling came from them. And they were my 2 best friends who always hover by my shoulders, Robin and Chris, who of course are not Robin and Chris anymore. I do my best not to hold them to those identities. And they said, I'm going to give you my nickname from New York City. They said, it's okay, Chef. You got to go back. And boom! Ow! This magnificent, huge being that I have become and that every single one of you are, is, check my grammar there, was squeezed back into this form that felt like it was about as big as a salt shaker. And it was excruciating. It was the most excruciating pain I've ever been in my life. And I lay there going, oh, no, oh. And at about that moment, or the next hour or two, because I honestly can't tell you how long this thing lasted, there was a knocking at my door. And I couldn't get up to answer it. And so I heard the knocking, I couldn't respond to it. And finally, I heard glass breaking, and I saw a hand come through the window and open the door and come in, and it was a coworker who spoke very quickly. And she said, "You haven't shown up to work for 3 days, and you haven't answered the phone." And I went, oh. Truth of the matter was, I don't know what actually had happened to me. 5 years later, I was diagnosed as having a cerebral accident, but that was much after the fact. I was unable to form, I had aphasia. I was unable to formulate words. I was totally dyslexic because letters did not live on paper anymore. They just lived in dance competitions on any plane they wanted. They were. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make them sit down. Sit down! Get in order! There went the writing career. I had amnesia. I remembered people's names, I remembered places, but I had lost all the details. To this day, I have a friend who says that I had hosted his wedding at on my property, and I still have no recall of that because it's in what I call ground zero. If it was anywhere too close to that date, I don't really remember it. So I was back in the body again, not very happily at that point, not very well at that point. And my friend called up the bosses and said, I found her, but she's not in very good shape. Apparently, she must have said that because my boss, Iris, the Mormon lady, showed up at my door and just loaded me into her car and started driving me around places, and I'm just sort of like, And I didn't know what had happened to me. I didn't know anything like it had happened to anybody else. I knew I was in bad shape. My godson and goddaughter's parents moved in with me. People just took over my life. They fed me and clothed me and took me where I needed to go. I tried going to a doctor. The doctor tried to give me Valium, because I was obviously depressed because I was crying all the time. So, I'm depressed? Oh God, I'm not depressed. I didn't say that, I thought that. So I threw out the prescription for Valium. And I gradually started to reteach myself how to speak. How to read was a little more complicated. This was in October of 1977. In May, I was still pretty much a basket case. My friends kidnapped me in a good way. They threw me in a Volkswagen van. It didn't even have good windshield wipers, so they had a rope tied to one windshield wiper, and the driver would put here and ice in it. And we drove from Paonia, Colorado to Alamogordo, New Mexico to the Quimby Center, where a clairvoyant named Robert Waterman did a 5-hour aura balance on me. And he retrieved most of my memories, some that I probably wouldn't have remembered even if I hadn't lost my memory. And he predicted some of my future, including that I would get a scholarship to become a Waldorf teacher, and I was like, what? And I was told, because when he did this aura balancing, they would have people just sit and meditate and hold the light. And my aura balancing went for 5 hours, which was exceedingly long. It went till the wee hours of the morning. And I was told the next day that the people were so energized by what had happened that they couldn't sleep, that they were up all night, that they had to go out, that it was amazing. And I went, that's not amazing. It was amazing to them. And he told me some things about past lives that are still private for me. And shortly after I went back home, I was still dealing with the fact that not only was I aphasic, but I could hear everything everyone was thinking. And I knew intimately that the Native American, when the Native American said, white man speak with forked tongue, there was more to it than just the white man lies. It was the white man, white woman, thinks one thought and speaks another. And it was very painful for me. It was very confusing because I could not honestly differentiate between what a person was thinking and what they were saying. And so I would run away crying, even with my friends, because somebody might say hello and think, oh, she's got a wart on her nose. And instead of saying hello, I would say, oh yeah, my mother has one too. And they get this look on their face. And I know I said something wrong. And so I would just run away crying, and that was my biography for a while. And eventually I had to ask for that ability to be taken away. But while I still had it, I couldn't work, and I was put on a CETA grant, which was a government grant to get a job. The government would pay people to hire you. And the only CETA grant in this town of 800 people that I lived in was actually the next town of 400 over, was a Waldorf school, a little nursery kindergarten. And so I went over there, and the two teachers, the kindergarten and nursery teacher, asked me a question, and I went, couldn't answer. And I could hear them thinking, oh, well, great, yeah, well, we're going to hire this idiot. But they were committed to my spending the day there. So they went away, and I went into the room with the children. And these were 3- and 4-year-old children. And 3- and 4-year-old children tell you exactly what's on their mind. You know, if they think that you have a funny wart on your nose, they say, how come you have a funny wart on your nose? And I could hear everything they were thinking, so I sat down and played with the children. I gave them everything they wanted. They were just thrilled, and I was so thrilled to be there. I could be at peace with these children. Thank you, God, to be a child, to be with children. And I was hired on the basis of the fact that the children were so happy. And they taught me how to be human again, how to speak. The two teachers left 6 months later, and I ended up in charge of this nursery kindergarten by myself. And this is just a little aside. There was one little 3-and-a-half-year-old, and one day I had 23 kids by myself, and it was getting to be much, and I yelled at them. And this 3-and-a-half-year-old turned around and used my father's nickname for me. She just drilled me with her eyes, and she said, "Sharunkala." And I went, okay. I guess that's not a real good teaching method, is it? And she turned around, and she was the same child she'd been a minute before. So they taught me a great deal about how to teach and how to be. And eventually, I was told that I wasn't really teaching Waldorf, so I went to the Waldorf Institute to become a Waldorf teacher. And while I was there, I finished, and for those of you who know Waldorf, I got my BA in anthroposophy. the 13th and last VA on the planet in Anticosta, accredited, by the way, through the University of Detroit. And I studied everything there was to study at that time at the Waldorf Institute in Southfield, Michigan. And those of you who don't know Waldorf, my first year's curriculum was weaving and spinning, doll making, knitting, drawing, painting, speech, movement, and philosophy. And so that helped to really heal me. I had become, after being right-sided, I had become left-sided. And this helped me regain some of the use of my right side. And long story short, I ended up teaching in the Austin Waldorf School through an awareness that that's where I was supposed to be. That was not my plan. But it was one of those sit up in the middle of the night kind of things. This is where you're supposed to go, and then you find out that they called your house in Detroit while you're in Chicago. I went and became a Waldorf teacher, and while I was there, someone came and wanted to do brain gym in the school, and Waldorf schools don't do somebody else's thing, so I was told to get rid of this person. And having sold vacuum cleaners door to door when I was a young married thing, I knew how to get rid of a salesperson. You invite him to you, you let him show you his wares, and then you say no. You don't say no over the phone, because he'll keep thinking he has a chance. So I invited this brain gym person to the Waldorf school, and he said, bring me a few children. And I said, no, you're not touching any of my children. If you have something to show me, you'll show it to me. You can do it on me. And so he did what is called in brain gym Denison laterality repatterning. It took him maybe 20 minutes or a half hour, and I stood there I believe we have touched down. I can feel my feet. I can see. I can hear. I was no longer dyslexic. I've been faking it really, really well for many years, but it was gone. And so I went, hold on, I think I'll get you a pilot study. So I convinced the faculty to let me do that, and I saw its tremendous benefits. So I was very gifted because Waldorf was a wonderful, beautiful, safe place that recognized past lives and the spiritual connections of the teachers, and whose main purpose is to protect the spiritual identity of the children and to teach them in a holistic way. And so I was very nurtured by that, and then I was introduced to the brain gym, which for near-death experiencers allowed me to integrate back into my body. And being in the body to me is really what this is all about, and that brings me to the last 7 years of my journey. I no longer refer to the other side. There is no other side. There's only here. I am there and here at the same time. There's no need to go out of the body. The light is in the body. The God is in your heart. My specialty is the brain. I've gotten a master's degree and I focus primarily on the brain, but the mind is in the heart. There's no place to go. There's nothing to do. You are the love that you have been looking for. That's what I've learned. And what is happening to me right now, it's kind of a funny thing. My physical vision is suddenly kind of starting to go, and I don't know what's going on with that. I think it may be temporary, because what is happening to me is that I have actual experience now. This is not an intellectual thought, that these eyes see this three-dimensional reality. These ears hear this three-dimensional reality. This body moves through a three-dimensional reality. But I am simultaneously living and seeing the light and living in the other reality that we talk about so much, the other side. So I know that it's all here. Intellectually, I know it's all now. However, I have not quite had that experience. I'm still living in the experience of linear time. And one of my goals is to get out of the experience of linear time. And this is what I mean about freedom. And I was talking to Diane about this last night. One of the reasons I like the work that I do is because it's about mastery. I think of it as spiritual mastery. In that the image that I like to use is that of, for some reason I like the New Testament's imagery. And Jesus is riding this donkey into town on Palm Sunday. And the donkey isn't riding Jesus. And there's a really good reason for that. The donkey really represents, just as in fairy tales do, the kinds of fairy tales we taught at Waldorf to the children, the physical body. And the master must take care of the physical body, because the donkey serves the master. The master needs to feed the donkey, needs to water the donkey, needs to groom the donkey, and if it's a good master, is kind to the donkey. And the donkey in turn will do what the master needs. But our bodies sometimes tend to ride us, especially our nervous systems. We are filled with habits, compulsions, obsessions, reflexes, and reactions that cause us to act in ways, raise your hand if this is true for you, and my hand's up highest, cause us to act in ways that we would not choose to act. Right? And so, to me, that is the donkey in charge. And so, in order to bring that light to the earth, that mastery, the truth, the love and the light to the earth, we cannot let the donkey tell us what to do. So it's all about learning, why am I reacting that way, and what's got power over me that is making me do something I wouldn't choose to do. And freedom is knowing how to talk to your body, how to talk to your nervous system, how to talk to your brain in such a way that your brain will listen, and how to listen to your body and brain in such a way that you know how to take care of it. And when you do that, then this becomes the vehicle for the fullest expression of God that is possible, because this body is the greatest gift. This life is the greatest gift. Now, I have awarenesses of past lives, but I pretend that this is my only life. And I seem to be reincarnated in this life every 7 years. And you know how your cells change every 7 years? So it's been 7 years since I spoke publicly about my near-death experience, and of course Diane waited 7 years to ask me here, because she's cooperating with this plan for my life. And then I thought about it, and I thought, well, maybe they've run out of bodies and they're just recycling. But think about it. It's so much easier to be reincarnated in the same body, because you don't have to change your social security number or your driver's license. You avoid all that red tape. But pretending that I have only this life, and that this was a precious gift given to me by God, why would I do what someone else tells me I'm supposed to do? Why would I accept from culture or my nation or my parents or anybody that I am defined by and need to act as if I had anything less than a gift of God? That my freedom is in determining how am I going to use this body in the period of time that I have been given to give it the fullest expression, to become what the seed of Sharon is, because I am unique. I am an amazing individual. Nobody, not one of you can be me. Nobody on this planet can be me. Well, and the same goes for you. Every single one of you is absolutely unique in our paradoxical sameness. You are already a winner by the fact that you got here. Of all those millions of little sperms being sucked into that wonderful embryo, yours got there first. You won the race. Why did you race so hard to get here if all you want to do is leave? So you won the race. What are you going to do with the prize? And to me, the prize is the freedom to express your true self, your highest nature, to claim your power, the ticket that you were given to be you and to make this world what we decide this world should be. And I do think that we are beginning to change it. I know that the times now seem rather dark and dire, and yet I see the light breaking through. And what I was shown was, and I was given some prophecies that I don't talk about usually, but what I was shown was that when you see real darkness in front of you, turn around. Because it's a shadow cast by that light over there. Don't put your attention on the darkness, put attention on the light. Thank you. I'm open for questions now.
Again until 5 o'clock.
Does anybody have any questions? If not, I can keep talking.
How about a little bit about the work that you're doing today?
Brendan? I find that even harder to talk about than the near-death experience. Brendan was actually, do you mind if I sit down?
No.
Brendan was actually started by a near-death experiencer. He doesn't actually talk about that very much, but his name is Paul Dennison. And he had a lot of learning difficulties as a kid. And he got his PhD in reading acquisition, and he worked for many years having learning disability centers, 7 centers in California, and he worked with developmental optometrists and chiropractors and osteopaths and OTs, and he put that together with something called Touch for Health. How many of you are familiar with Touch for Health? Which is a blend of Western knowledge of acupuncture meridians with how the muscles move and how the organs function. And he blended this very Western scientific information about how we learn and how we relearn with the Eastern philosophies of the acupuncture meridians and the Western adaptation of that in Touch for Health. It actually spurred me, the thesis that I did recently, I just got my master's degree in October, because I'll say this, the near-death experience is really about balance. For those who were very much involved in material things and ego and about getting power, the near-death experience balanced them to be less interested in monetary things, and to be less interested in their own personal egos and more in gentility and sweetness and in being a member of their community. I was over here where I was having these amazing spiritual experiences. I didn't tell you about the eagles coming down, and the 2 eagles, when I asked where I should, what I should do, the 2 parent eagles, I was surrounded by a flock first of magpies, then a flock of ravens, 12 ravens or crows circled me, and then I took a step forward, I could feel something, and the 2 mother and father bald eagles were this far from me, and they just pierced me with their eyes, and then the male, after a few moments of staring at each other, just flew over my head like that, and it actually grazed my hair. And so, I got off my track there somehow. I'll find my way back through my tangents. I went to China to complete this master's degree, and I took the quantum physics of my friend Hal Puthoff, the field. He had written an article called Metaphysics and the Matrix, or something like that, or Physics and Metaphysics. And he said that he writes on what's called the field, which is 0-point energy, for those of you who are scientific, 0-point gravity. And he's sort of the leading proponent of that. He's pretty famous in quantum physics circles on the fringe. And poor guy. He's really doing some great research with that. And he wrote, it doesn't make any sense because nature is so economical. It doesn't make any sense to have a field, a unified field over here for science, and chi or prana over here for spirituality. So he said they're obviously the same thing. So I took that, I took the Western science, because I really feel that science is an important focus for those of us who would like to have an impact in the world. We need to be able to speak a language that the world can comprehend, and that's the language of science. So I took this Western science about the field, which is also, you know, a little bit fringe, pretty fringe, just like what the bleep is fringe, but it's getting there. And went to China and studied Qi. And Brain Gym takes this Qi, this field, and uses movement, a modern day yoga, and acupressure points to stimulate the body to release old patterns of behavior, to move it out, to flush the system. And then, when the system is released and relaxed, to re-educate the system, the whole nervous system, and this is that mastery again, to re-educate it in such a way that if you saw what the bleep, those connections in your brain, the old ones leave off and new ones are made. So you can live your life differently with your clear intention. And that's about as close as I can get to an explanation of Brain Gym. While I was in China, the person who was supposed to be our Qigong master came out in golden pajamas. And he had a photographer, and he had his crew of publicity agents, and it was amazing. There was this one woman who, I asked her age, she was 47, she could go down all the way to the ground on one leg, bend down with one leg and raise the other leg up above her head. So, I mean, he was good, but boy, he was tough. And I was traveling with 9 martial artists, and he took one look at me and just went, oh. And I traveled all the way to China to study this. I've been doing Qigong at home for a year. I wasn't that bad. So I went off and wandered through the gardens to cry. And by the time I came back, a little guy, a little skinny man had appeared out of the bushes. And he was wearing an old gray coat with the lining slightly hanging. And underneath that, he had a lady's white sweater on with little pearl buttons. And he had these Qigong shoes, like those black China shoes with a hole in the toe. And he comes out of the bushes and he says, I've heard about you. He speaks a little English. I've heard about your group. I would like to be your teacher. I will not charge you any money. And so the leader of the group talks to him for a little bit, and we all get together. Should we give this guy a chance? And we decide that none of us like the guy in the yellow pajamas. And we thought this little guy was cute, and so he said, I'll teach you for free. So he gave us this session. So we're all standing there, and he didn't have anything fancy at all to do. Our first posture was to basically stand, if I didn't have the microphone, both hands like this. But we were supposed to close our eyes, and we heard a cooing sound like a pigeon. Spinning. I kept peeking. There aren't any pigeons in China. Why am I hearing pigeons? And he adjusted my posture. Apparently I was tilted this way, so he brought his hand over here and he went like that. And like a gas oven, you know how the flames just sort of spread? He went like that, and flames spread across my abdomen where I'd had surgery and scar tissue. And they continued to burn for, I don't know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Nice, deep, rich oven kind of heat. And the pigeon kept cooing, cooing. You know, peeking, and then we spent about an hour and a half, I guess, with him, and then afterwards, 10 of us are all sort of talking, and, did you hear a pigeon? I heard a pigeon. Is that a pigeon? Is that him? I think it was him. He was getting louder when he got closer. Did he touch you? Yeah. Did he touch you? Yeah. Did you feel what Yeah. So, turned out he was one of the masters of Qigong, Dr. Tong, a famous master of Qigong. And I don't know how he heard about us since he lived an hour and a half away by bus. But he became our teacher. He stayed by our side day and night for the next 5 days, everywhere we went, before we went off into the mountains to study with the Taoist masters. So that was, meetings with remarkable people has been a major theme of my life and a major joy of my life. So that was a long answer to a question about brain gym, but brain gym includes Qi, but we don't like to say that in brain gym because, you know, like I was in Tyler, Texas recently teaching brain gym. And one of the women came up to me, she had her hair done just so with lots of spray in it, and she said, we weren't sure about brain gym because we weren't sure Jesus would approve. So we avoid the use of the word Qi, we just find other ways to explain it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm fascinated with your story about animals. The most love I've ever seen came in the eyes of the cat that was soon to leave me. We got a beautiful closure. And I just have to wonder if you had chose to go towards that life choice, towards the animals, I mean being kissed by a hummingbird. And I just have to wonder what you would have learned if you had followed that path. And are animals attracted to you still?
Yeah, well, we'll both always wonder why traveled that path. I do brain gym in my home, and my practice has changed recently to be many more young people, young adults and adults. But it used to be, because of my connection to Waldorf education and to working with children, and still remains, to be with a lot of children. And so I do it in my house, and I keep a lot of toys in my house, and I keep it very non-clinical. And I had 2 cats. My one cat that just passed, Star, came on Christmas in 1991, right when I stopped doing Waldorf education and I founded Austin IAMS. That year is the year she came to me on Christmas Eve. She left on Easter.
Oh my. Oh my.
And I called her my therapy cat. I had one parent who said, oh, this is going to be a big session because Star came out. Buddy would come out for the small stuff. And Star had a tumor. And I was in Denver taking a class, and I knew that when I got home I was going to need to put her down. And I had her cat care people were, even the cat psychic was looking in on her. And when I got home, she was really in bad shape, and she was hiding under the furniture, and she wouldn't let me touch her, and she was skin and bones. She had lost 8 pounds, and her coat was terrible, and if I touched her, she would just cringe in pain. And Good Friday, I saw a boy, and it was his first time ever to see me, and he was brought kicking and screaming by his mother to see me. And he was an adopted boy, and he had lost his left eye to a tumor when he was 2 months old. And he was sitting on my couch, you know, I can't believe you brought me here. And Star comes trotting out, and she sits at the edge of the entrance to that room, and she stares at him, and she trots over to him, and she sits right beneath him and looks up at him, and he says, ah, she's just like me. She's missing her left eye. And he proceeded to pet her quite roughly because he had never learned how to be gentle. And I knew how much pain she was in. She just sat there and allowed herself to be petted. And it lasted a while, and I was just cringing for her. And that was her last week on Earth. So I still have a very, very strong connection to animals. I can communicate with cats. I speak cat. And I still have a calling. I mean, it still draws me to go back to the wilderness and to be with the animals. Because I got to tell you, folks, they're a lot easier than people. My teacher was doing, in brain gym, it's called a balance. And a session is called a balance, and I love that word, balance. My teacher was doing a class in my house, and she had to teach a very in-depth, advanced, complicated balance, so she wanted a very easy goal. And I knew I had a very easy goal. My goal was to spend more time out in nature. So I jumped up and said, oh, this will be easy. I just want to spend more time in nature. It turned out underneath that goal was that I was angry with the entire human race. Because I'd come back from the light in order to spread love, and nobody was getting it fast enough for me. I was furious. I was crying. I was cursing. I was having a really hard time. And then recently, I went to a session with a teacher named Bill Bauman, and he told me that my ego was rapidly dying, or not so rapidly, that it was starving. And told me to crawl back up into the light till it was done. And I was with that same teacher, and we had done this balance years before, and I realized the person I was really impatient with, who wasn't getting the love fast enough, was me. And so I stopped being angry at everybody else. I stopped being angry at myself too. I decided I better give myself some patience here in terms of learning how to love as well as God does. But animals know how to do that. They just know how to do that. They're not as complex as we are. They don't have the temptations we do. And they don't have the conflicts we do, and so therefore they don't have the dynamic tension we do. But they don't have they're not being asked to co-create, and we are. So even though it looks like we're making a mess right now, I think we're just practicing. And we're going to get better. Mike! Would you like the mic, Mike?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ed. I got a lot out of it, and not, you know, I had an experience not quite, I'm sorry to say, not near as profound and meaningful as what you shared with us, and I really got a lot out of some of the things you said. I'm just curious that during your near-death experience, when you went through it, did you have any recall of previous lives or past lives, or was it, you might have said that or you didn't, and I wasn't paying attention, but did you have any recall in that?
I didn't mention it. I was told by that clairvoyant that I went as far into death that I could possibly go and still come back. So mine was a profound near-death experience. I was later hypnotized by a friend who was a social worker because I was missing that part from the point that I went to the temple, and then all of a sudden I was suddenly on the veil, and I felt like that my memory was deliberately removed, that there was some part of the experience I wasn't supposed to remember, and that's partly why I had the amnesia. But you could also say that I didn't remember that part because I had amnesia. I don't know. I have had past life visions all my life. I didn't get that in the near-death experience, no. But I have not only seen aspects of my past life, I've actually lived with and known people who recognized me from past lives. And I lived in a town where we all knew that we had had a past life together, and one of us, she never was able to buy the picture, but actually found a picture of us all together in a past life. So, but I tend to focus on this life, because it's confusing enough. You're welcome.
I have a question. One of the things that struck me while you were talking, even though it happened before your near-death experience, is having that time out in the wilderness and the, you know, communication and closeness with the animals and that. I had some of that with after the near-death experience, and also, I guess, being frustrated with people in life. And your call to get back into being with people. And I feel like that's what I'm being called to do now with going to assisted living and being so surrounded by people. And a lot of them have had near-death experiences. So I'm thinking, well, maybe some of the connection will be there. Like we were talking about with the Waldorf School, places that allow you to be totally yourself. And I would like to reconnect with that. Kind of resisting though, a moment.
I do understand the resistance, and I've been pulled kicking and screaming a lot of the time. And the message I was given was, the balance for me was, I could live in the spirit world for all of eternity. I had this brief period of time to be in this body and to be a human being. And of course, I didn't know there was any such thing as a near-death experience. I didn't speak about my near-death experience for 14 years. I didn't know there was a term for it. I knew that I could be locked up for speaking about it. So I thought I had been, like given a mission like Jesus to save the world, but I couldn't balance my checkbook. What a pathetic Messiah I would be. But it really is important to be in the world, and the opportunity to be a teacher, the opportunity to be a healer has been a great gift once I got used to the idea.
Well, my question is regarding children. I'm sure you've heard about the different labels, indigo children or star children. And I wasn't sure how the Waldorf community was sort of responding to this, but I've recently met a speaker from Holland, an 80-year-old man who believes that autistic children or children with attention deficit actually are labeled that and considered that they have a certain problem, but that they're sort of special children in a way of have special spiritual gifts, and are just not as understood by society and are being dropped or in a certain way through therapy, but they're just simply misunderstood. And I was just wondering what your insight would be.
Did everybody hear that? She said that she was wondering, the so-called indigo children, the autistic children, the ADHD children that are getting all these labels, now they're labeling them bipolar, that they were actually children with spiritual gifts that are being mislabeled. And all I can say is yes. When the children come to me, the first thing I tell them is, you're picking up radio stations, because they can understand this. I said, most people pick up 5 stations on the radio, and they're over here in the middle. I said, but there are a lot of stations over here, and there's a lot of stations over here, and I knew this because I had to reteach myself this. So I knew that it had nothing to do with their intelligence, but that it was a perceptual issue being in a 3-dimensional body. I said, you're picking up these other stations, and it's like when you're riding through the country and you're getting 2 stations and you can't hear one clearly. They're picking up all this extra information, you probably are too, and so it gets in the way of your perceiving what is considered to be normal. And so you're having a hard time functioning, and my intention as your brain gym instructor is to get you to be able to tune into these stations when you need to, because then you'll be free. to do what you need to do without losing the ability to tune into these stations, that you'll be able to go to them more by choice than being stuck in them. And to me, the ADD kids are picking up on all the nervousness of the adults around them, and they're acting it out. And I have an autistic girl that I work with on a regular basis, and she and I telepath. And it's great. So, yeah, one of the things I like about Brain Gym in particular is that it doesn't label. We just take you as you are, and I don't do anything. I simply facilitate whatever your spirit, your destiny wants for you.
Bless you.
May I speak to that problem?
Please.
You can use this with little children, particularly ADD, or with any normal child. When they're asleep, you go in, you stand beside them, mention their name 3 times in a normal voice, and then you tell them that the presence of God is all around them and within every atom and cell of their body, and restoring, renewing, and healing them so that they can express life in a normal way. And any other loving thoughts that you can think of, that mother and dad love them very much, and that they're wanted and needed in the family, and any other loving thoughts that you can think of. A hypnotist in California said he did this with all of his children, told them to keep, while they were sleeping, told them to keep their rooms neat, that they concentrate perfectly and remember everything that they learned in school. And he said that they went all through school and got all A's in their subjects. They kept their rooms neat, and their behavior was perfect. But you can use that, and it's just like a form of prayer, but it's very, very effective. The one woman that I used it with, her son was told that, or she was told that by the doctors at Children's Memorial Hospital, that if he didn't have an operation, his 6-month-old son, they finally diagnosed that if he didn't have a liver transplant by the time he was 1 year old, he would die. And she did this every night, and she foresaw the outcome. Simple scene where she saw visualized the doctor holding up an x-ray saying every night as she drifted off to sleep. It's a miracle, it's a miracle. 6 weeks after we spoke together, she called me and said, "Mr. Galrad, that's just the way you said it. That's just the way it's happened," with the doctor holding up the x-ray. But a lot of things happened in between, where the nutritional department found things, and groups began praying for her son, and everything came together beautifully, and that transplant was never required. There was a natural healing.
Thanks, Evan. That's really interesting.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. I want to thank every one of you for, it's a beautiful day outside in June, and I know you came in here and you had other places to go, so thank you. It's really been a gift to me and a privilege to be with you today.
Before you leave, I just want to remind you that we have Susan Weishart next month doing a group past life regression. Don't miss it. It will be wonderful. And thank you all for coming. Again, it was a beautiful day, and we were so blessed. Another wonderful session. I'm always in such total awe. I don't know how this happens. But I'm awfully grateful. So take good care. All the sessions have been signed up for. If you are one of the last two, check with me to confirm the time.